Nous allons reprendre nos travaux. Voilà, donc si vous voulez bien reprendre vos places, nous allons donc continuer pour cette dernière après-midi de travail. Tout à l'heure, je vous indiquerai quelques modifications dans l'ordonnancement de cet après-midi. Le volume horaire ne change pas, c'est l'ordre des questions qui sont traitées qui sera modifié. En revanche, pour le début de cet après-midi, rien ne change. Nous avons le plaisir d'accueillir deux nouvelles intervenantes qui vont traiter du sujet global qui est le nôtre, mais sous des angles différents. Et donc, j'ai le plaisir d'accueillir Madame Sophie Crossat, qui est professeure de sciences sociales dans une université catholique à Mayence, l'université catholique de Mayence en Allemagne, et dont les thèmes de travail portent plus spécifiquement sur les questions de théorie sociale. Et donc, c'est sous cet angle qu'elle va aborder le sujet qui nous préoccupe, à savoir celui de l'intégration des migrants et des réfugiés. Et donc, je vous donne la parole avec grand plaisir. Sorry.
Ladies and gentlemen, we just have a little announcement here. We made slight changes in the program for the afternoon, so the hours we're going to be here at the same hours, but just to let you know, so we'll wrap up the workshops right after them and before the coffee break, so that we're completely done with the workshops and then we can enjoy our coffee. So at 3:20, we'll have the feedback from the workshops. Then at 4 p.m., we'll have the coffee break, which will last for 20 minutes. And then the first panel of our last session here at this conference will be the Regional Voices panel. So at 4:20, we'll start the Regional Voices panel, so I kindly ask the panelists to be ready for 4:20. The Q&A session for the panel will start at 5 and will last for 10 minutes. And then we will start the presentation of the International Initiatives for Migrant and Refugees Education Network at 5:10. And the signature of partnership will take place at 5:30 p.m. So these are the changes in the schedule. If you would like to take a look at them again, we'll have them printed at the registration desk. I also have a couple of important announcements for tomorrow, and I wanted to make sure that they're communicated a couple of times because this is really important for tomorrow for the Papal audience. So if I could ask the technicians to change the picture for the San Pietro Square. So here is St. Peter's Square. Please do not come here to the Gregorian in the morning. Do not come here. We won't be here, as Anthony Cernera said yesterday. We will be at the Pontifical University. If you could go back to the to San Pietro. I know that the poor technicians, they don't see it on their computer. They can just do it here. So the right one. No, this is the right one. Just a couple technical things for the Papal audience. So this is the meeting point. Then we have, please be punctual, 9:30, the right one. Yeah. So the right one I showed. Yeah. Yeah. So the right one, the one that I just showed. Please be there at 9:30 sharp. Please be punctual. This is really important. We're talking about Vatican diplomacy here, so we really need to be on time. 9:30 sharp at the right-hand fountain of St. Peter's Square. This is what you have to have with you to enter this papal audience. You have to have your badge and your ID, because obviously we'll be getting through the security check. If you could kindly leave your luggage at your hotels or wherever it's convenient with you, do not bring your luggage to the Vatican. This is the audience only for the participants of this conference. So unfortunately, you're not allowed to bring friends, mothers, sisters, and brothers with you. Please be by yourself as participants of this conference. And we really appreciate acknowledging that for us as organizers. And inside the room, where we will have a pleasure to meet the Holy Father, the seats will be assigned. So please let us, the organizers, show you at the spot where you could be seated during this papal audience. And I know this is an issue when we're talking about Vatican diplomacy. What is the dress code? So the dress code is obviously elegant, but not the whole diplomatic thing of the veils, etc., etc. So let's just be elegant to see the Holy Father. That's the only thing that we need to remember about. So 9:30, the right-hand fountain of the Vatican, and thank you so much for your attention, and I appreciate especially our next speaker for her patience, and I'll give you the floor. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Paulina. Et donc, nous reprenons le cours de nos journées avec le professeur Sophie Crossat qui va intervenir sur le thème Risks and Challenges, Discussing Perspective of Migration and Integration. Merci beaucoup.
Yeah, thanks so much for the kind introduction. Thanks for the invitation. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to talk to you here today. I find this conference really very interesting, and mainly because there's such a broad variety of contributions. I think we have heard lots of things that we do not, or most of us are not usually in contact with day by day. On the other hand, I must admit that I also do have a few concerns that I would like to mention here. And to put it a tiny little bit bluntly, I am sometimes a bit concerned that we might be too happy with ourselves. That we are, in other words, I think we could and should be able to challenge ourselves a bit more. Therefore, I have completely rewritten my paper today. I have to apologize in particular to Loic, who has, in his very nice way, given me a clear assignment of what to do today, and I'm not going to do this. Part of this is also because I'm one of the last speakers in this large round today, and I feel the need to bring some aspects together to set some signposts, so to speak, in this overall discussion. I would, however, happily offer to send the organizers my original paper and distribute it to anyone who's interested in different levels of support for refugee students in German academia and so on. So maybe just very shortly, my personal background. I am a sociologist, and my main fields of interests are social theory in general, globalization, and theory of conflict. So this is broadly what I have been dealing with over the last years. At the moment, I hold a chair at the Catholic University in Mainz in Germany. And this has a denomination of social sciences with a focus on migration and integration. So spot on for this conference. Yeah. We have developed, and we are in our second year only now, we have developed a new teaching program, and some of you may have seen these flyers already. So this is our university. This teaching program, I want to mention this shortly because it links in quite nicely with what we have discussed in the morning. This teaching program is an international program in the sense that we are teaching in 2 languages, half is in German, half is in English. We have 1 year abroad. Students go either to study or to half study, half on an internship. And from the first year onwards, our students are being distributed to placements. So already from the first year onwards, they are working in ministries, they are working in foundations, in large organizations like Caritas, and so on and so forth, a broad variety of places. I do mention this because this shows for which kind of level we are training our students. It is not this classical social work level, but we want them to take on tasks in the broad area of project planning, organization, also administration, political functions, and so on and so forth. This is very unusual. To my knowledge, there is no other study program in Germany like this, and I'm not very clear about Europe and other countries. So much for the background, and just generally speaking, we are always looking for partners in research and teaching as well, so we would be very happy, me and my colleagues sitting over there, to discuss any ideas with you. I would like now to come back to my starting point. I think that in the past 3 days, it is already? We're in the 3rd day? Yeah. In the past 3 days, there were 2 main lines of discussion. One has been discussing case studies like Mexico, Lebanon, and so on and so forth. And the other line of discussion has referred to these so-called receiving countries. These rich countries, how do countries like Australia, Portugal, Germany deal with this type of students, and what have we done so far? And I'm referring now especially to the second line of discussion, and this is also where my criticism starts with maybe we are a little bit too happy with ourselves. I think just to outline the main lines of my argument, I think there is a certain risk. There is a certain risk that we move between extremes. And this moving between extremes is blocking sometimes, or is a risk of blocking our view on important tasks. And I would like to outline 2 specific risks here. There are more, but just for the purpose of this paper. The first specific risk is, in my view, grounding requests of action on primarily normative grounds. And the second, and so to speak, opposite risk that we are taking at the moment is to treat issues of migration and integration as some kind of technical problem or isolating problems, segmenting problems, yeah? And related to this, similar, not the same, but similarly, there is a risk of being stuck between individual cases on the one hand and numbers and statistics on the other hand. So let's look at this in, let's look at this in some more detail. First, at this strongly normative approach. This approach characteristically starts out with making claims on empathy and solidarity. And now do not get me wrong. I perfectly agree with these claims on solidarity and empathy. But I think there are also some structural risks inherent in this that we as academics need to keep in mind when we deal with each other and with other persons on the grounds of these claims. The first structural point is it does not really work when we say we are different and this is why we belong together. Difference as such is not the reason of saying, and this is why we are together or belong together or something. The second thing is that when we are then trying to ground this on some more stable basis, and we are referring on religious beliefs, for instance, yeah, or humanitarian beliefs, to put this a bit broader, I think it is problematic because on the one hand, in contexts like this, in this room, it's obvious. We are sharing this basis. Yeah, it's there. In other contexts outside of this room, and this is not a secret, these are not seen necessarily as valid claims. So we're back to the same point. On what grounds can we develop these claims? I was reminded of this yesterday when Willy Weißflug he's sitting over there. It was more a side remark when he said, or when it was printed out actually on a slide, unfortunately, reaction and commitment based on compassion and responsibility tend to be short-lived. And they do so for some reason. So in another structural problem, that is not what we intend, and that is not what I would not say that this is something that is always there, but as a risk, we have to keep this in mind. Another structural problem is that this normative approach of charity in the broadest sense also includes a certain hierarchy. It is having us as givers and others as receivers. Yeah, we just, as I said, it's not something that is there always. It's something that is maybe in most cases not there, but it's something that we have to be aware of. There are structures in these relationships that we don't want. The categories are fuzzy. Humanity, human being, dignity. It all comes back to the question, whom do I accept as being like me? Sufficiently like me in order to enjoy the same rights, the same perspectives on life. And I will come back to this, it's actually one of my main points in this paper. This requires something that is really demanding. It requires a readiness to relativize myself vis-à-vis the other. I have to put myself as a question. And that goes far beyond this giving structure. So preliminary, just what kind of implications to come from this? Preliminarily, as I said. We need to readdress this kind of borders between us and others. I think we need to understand that it's about the terms, the terminology here is centering or should be centered around acknowledgement and participation. Anerkennung und Teilhabe in Deutsch. And then, of course, on such a basis, but not really without it, in my view, then we can start to think of diversity as being a source of strength. Yeah? Then there's this potential. Now to the second risk that I'm seeing in this overall structure, and this is about technical solutions. So there the general approach is giving information, yeah? Standardizing information and social contact, in a way also isolating questions and areas to organize them in segments. And the main idea or the main aim would be to make the very complex issue of integration in this case in a way manageable. I have been asked if I could write some teaching material on the subject managing integration. It was a paid job, but unfortunately I had to reject because I don't believe in this. Managing integration is a kind of idea that tries to, in some ways, simplify the issues so much that we live with this kind of false peace, yeah, and say, okay, now I'm going to do this or that. And I want to give you an example of this. This is a special program of the DAAD, German Exchange Service. It has been mentioned already before here in this audience. And in this special program, they call it a special program for supporting refugee students. To be more precise, it is about supporting people supporting refugee students. And it has a number of courses. Bear with me, it's a long list. I'm going to reduce it slightly. So, educational backgrounds and university admission for refugee studies from Syria and Iraq. The same for students from sub-Saharan Africa, students from Afghanistan and Iran, and so on. The legal situation of refugee students, 3 times. Intercultural communication and language classes for refugees. Trauma awareness, recognizing traumata and conveying offers of assistance, twice. Educational backgrounds at university admission of refugee students from, again, sub-Saharan Africa. Conceptualizing and realizing language classes for refugees. Okay, this is less than half of what is enclosed in this program. And on the one hand, one could say this may be a case of German over-regulation. Having lived in the UK for some years, I do doubt this national stereotype, but even more importantly, there is this undertone, again, of alleged manageability. There are packaged skills, there are packaged competencies, tools, and so on and so forth. Another short part of what Willi Weißruck said yesterday, a quote, information and guidance are crucial, but often not sufficient and underused. So these kind of condensed information bits and pieces, they can work, but they do depend on a certain support. They have to be accompanied, in my view, by personal and a much broader support than just being offered in isolated ways. So the second preliminary implication is that we do need to accept the complexity of the subject. Then, what are our challenges following from this as academics, and possibly especially as academics in Catholic institutions? Generally speaking, I think we need to understand what we can and must address in an incredibly large field as migration and integration. And I will refer to some more specific points now and move from the more general to the more specific step by step. So first, I think we must not forget what is often outsourced as context, so-called context. Like the political structures worldwide and how they developed and how they are sustained. This has been mentioned in one of the papers this morning as well. The second point I would like to mention is we need to do conceptual work. We need to work on our concepts. As I said, the field is full of unclarity. Mobility, migration, migrant, refugee, integration, borders, self and other. I could go on and on. Yeah. So generally, what we need is, in my view, a more systematic approach and including this added perspective, not losing the other perspectives, but including consciously the added perspective. What are the basics of human coexistence? How do we work socially? How do we function? And I would like to give you just one very quick example on what I mean with the help of the concept of the stranger. The concept of the stranger has been addressed by my favorite my favorite classical sociologist, Georg Simmel, and he has said, the stranger is the one who comes today and stays tomorrow. So not the guest who comes today and leaves tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, yeah? But the person that comes and stays, and in this sense comes into my world, comes into my life, and is there. And here starts the problem, because as soon as this one is somehow in my life, I have to relate. I have to interact or develop some kind of interaction with this person. The core idea that Simmel tries to convey, in my view, is that here we have, at the same time, distance and proximity. And then, of course, what we can immediately learn from this in way of conceptual thinking is, I would say, that there is a fine line between making the other a stranger or exotizing the person. Yeah, in German, the German word would be verfremden. And on the other hand, making the other too familiar in the sense of, I know who you are, I know what you want, I know what you need. So the challenge academically, but also generally, would be, in my view, to find some kind of appropriate middle way. The stranger is neither nor good nor bad, and all normative approaches, no matter from which direction, carry this kind of load or baggage. The starting point must be acknowledgement of difference. And from this point, we can go on, in my view. Just to mention the background, Simmel's sociology of conflict, of course, is here very interesting. And I think for the subject as such, it's very interesting because he acknowledges the disintegrative potential of conflicts. But at the same time, he says, most conflicts do also have an integrative potential. We can integrate via difference as well. This is possible. And this is something that enlarges our thinking of integration substantially, in my view. Let me draw a few conclusions, more specifically for us as academics. I think one thing is that we need to be aware that although migration is not extraordinary at all, it is normal. It is very challenging, even if we have a very positive attitude to it, and even if we have own experiences. Maybe a very short example. Again, when part of my own empirical research has been during the time when really large numbers of refugees have come to Germany. I went with some local politicians into these villages where they were building provisional houses for these refugees. And in one village, they were using for this meeting the kind of sports hall. It was packed, more than 400 people, everybody from this village was in this little sports hall. And they expressed lots of concerns. At some point, I was asking, just out of interest, how many of you do have a migratory background in your own family, either yourself or your parents or your grandparents? And I was the first to raise my hand. Then the board behind me, I saw from this part of my eye, raising hands, and then suddenly there was a wave. More than half of the people raised their hands. They were sitting there. It was a clear example of integration, yeah, in this village context. Everybody was there. And still, although there is this maybe generally positive attitude, although there is family experience and lots of family talk about this this subject of flight, being a refugee, and so on, still concerns are in the foreground there. So we have to take this into account, that it is really, really very sensitive. Then we do need systematic approaches to increase the sustainability of actions. This follows from what I've said before. And then there are, I think, for us as academics, 3 main tasks and challenges. The first one is, I would say, we need to combine approaches. And combining approaches may be a euphemism for we need to do everything at the same time. That means we need to identify and address core research questions. And at the same time, we need to develop multifaceted teaching strategies, which are demanding as well. And then, of course, the third thing is, in my view, we should take part in civil society activity in a broad sense. The second of these tasks and challenges that I've listed here is we need to exchange on best and also on worst practices, because I'm quite sure that all of us have best and worst practices and experiences. In order to be able to develop our questions and ideas further together. And the basis of all this, and this is my third point, is, in my view, that we need to be very, very alert for my counterpart and me, and especially for interactions that are taking place, so to speak, between us. So concretely, again, coming back again to this point that I've mentioned before shortly, there's a step. I have to relativize myself in every moment and in every function. This is demanding and I find also exhausting. And there will be problems. And I do genuinely think that it is these kind of problems that we have to exchange about. These kind of problems that we experience in this kind of exchange that we have to discuss and take into account when we develop our ideas. I do not deny, as I said before, I wrote this paper today, and it is a thinking process, and more optimistically, it's hopefully work in progress. But I think these are a few elements that have not been spelled out completely in our discussion so far. I would like to end with a quote of Stephen, I don't know how he calls himself, Rasch? To me, it looks like a German family name, Rasche. In any case, he said, our subject is conflict and risk is inherent. He applied this, of course, to this highly acute conflict zone. But I would wish for an understanding that this could be also our general starting point. Thanks very much.
Merci beaucoup, Dr Crossin. Avant de passer la parole, je dois dire que j'ai beaucoup apprécié votre intervention, qui est, à mes yeux, est une intervention qui est placée sous le signe du courage. Qui est placée sous le signe du courage tout simplement parce que vous êtes reparti d'un point de vue académique. Et je vous suis très reconnaissant d'avoir introduit ce qu'on pourrait appeler une dissonance cognitive dans notre approche. Effectivement, il y a toujours, lorsqu'on travaille ensemble, et surtout sur un sujet qui est aussi important et émotionnellement provoquant que le nôtre, il y a toujours le risque de se retrouver dans une sorte de « ça va de soi ». Et effectivement, nous partageons ici un certain nombre de valeurs et de convictions. Et je crois que le courage que vous avez eu, et le courage qui consiste à repartir de ce que nos différentes disciplines, en l'occurrence pour la vôtre, la sociologie, peuvent nous apprendre. En vous écoutant, je pensais à mes propres travaux, puisque je travaille depuis une trentaine d'années sur les catholiques et l'aide au développement. Et ce que vous dites, ce que vous nous avez dit à l'instant sur la question des réfugiés, des migrants, me renvoie directement à ce que je constate sur l'aide des catholiques et l'aide en général apportée aux pays en voie de développement et ce qu'on appelait déjà dans les années 50 les étrangers ou les pauvres. Votre première interpellation a consisté à nous dire attention aux limites de l'injonction morale. Voilà. Moi, c'est ce que je rencontre dans, je dirais, dans l'histoire. L'injonction morale, l'émotion servent dans les situations d'urgence. Or, ce qui nous a été rappelé depuis 3 jours par les différents spécialistes, c'est que précisément, la crise des réfugiés et des migrants n'est pas une crise. C'est une donnée structurelle des relations internationales. Voilà. Donc, il va falloir vivre avec cette situation pendant encore des décennies. Et l'émotion et l'injonction morale ne résisteront pas au temps, effectivement. Et donc, dans ce que vous nous avez dit, j'entends bien cette limite qui consiste à dire à la fois nous avons besoin d'être mus par un certain nombre de valeurs, de convictions, etc. Et en même temps, on ne peut pas en rester là. De la même façon, ce que vous nous avez dit comme sociologue, alors je suis politologue, je me retrouve dans votre approche, consiste à nous mettre en garde devant la complexité du réel. Effectivement, il y a toujours des risques à penser que nous pouvons intervenir de manière très spécifique, très particulière, pour gérer à tel ou tel endroit la question de l'intégration des migrants. Et vous nous rappelez que ce sont des processus complexes et que ce sont des processus qui vont à l'encontre de l'évidence. J'ai beaucoup aimé ce que vous nous avez dit sur la nécessité de partir plutôt des différences. Le cas de l'Allemagne est tout à fait significatif, mais vous auriez pu prendre aussi le cas français. Ce qui nous semble aller de soi, précisément, ne va pas de soi dans notre société. Il ne va pas de soi ni dans les valeurs, ni dans l'accueil, et ça ne va pas non plus de soi dans le fonctionnement même de nos sociétés. Voilà. Et je crois que ces 2 interpellations que vous avez eu le courage de nous adresser ne peuvent que nous être utiles pour la suite de nos travaux. L'une des finalités, vous le savez bien, de ces journées, c'est de continuer à réfléchir, à travailler, y compris de manière pratique, dans le cadre d'une association spécifique. Et je pense que ce serait effectivement une grave erreur que de penser que ce sera facile. Non, ce ne sera pas facile, et nous allons avoir besoin effectivement d'approches comme les vôtres, et que nous puissions repartir de nos points de vue académiques en sachant que la société, ça n'est pas que du management. On voit bien quelle pensée est sous-jacente ou quel horizon culturel. Non, une société ne se manage pas. C'est plus difficile que cela. Donc merci beaucoup pour cette très belle interpellation, pour cette mise en relation de concepts. Je pense que là aussi, vous avez enrichi notre approche, et que cela nous sera extrêmement profitable pour la suite de nos travaux, auxquels j'espère vous continuerez d'être associés de manière très, très proche. Merci. Alors, nous allons changer de discipline et accueillir non plus une sociologue, mais une économiste, avec Madame Cristina Dadio, qui est senior analyste à l'UNESCO, qui a un passé extrêmement intéressant également au sein de l'Organisation pour la coopération économique pour la coopération et le développement économique, l'OCDE, et qui va nous parler du travail de l'UNESCO, et plus précisément d'un rapport qui est un rapport extrêmement connu, qui est publié par l'UNESCO sur les questions de l'éducation et la place que nos sujets prennent dans ces rapports. Merci beaucoup, Madame, d'être présente avec nous.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much for having invited me here. My presentation will be a little bit different from what you have heard until now, and it will be in 2 parts. The first part will be about the new report, the Global Education Monitoring Report, which is, I don't know if you are familiar with it, is the UN flagship, United Nations flagship publication on education. And in fact, the Global Education Monitoring Report has received a mandate by the international education community to monitor progress towards education in the Sustainable Development Goals agenda. And we released the new report on accountability in education, which is relevant also for what we are talking about here. Before going into the presentation, I will present a short video that illustrates in a nutshell what is accountability for.
Committed to achieve equitable quality education by the year 2030. Governments are responsible for achieving this goal, but others have responsibilities too. Schools, teachers, parents and students, international organizations, private sector. Unfortunately, the challenge is large. Millions are not going to school, and many more are leaving school not having learnt enough. This year's Global Education Monitoring Report shows how accountability can help. Accountability helps show who is responsible for what, and how problems can be fixed. Governments are held to account by judges, parliamentarians, auditors, ombudsmen, and international organizations. But we all have the power to hold governments to account. The press, elections, and protests all play an important role. Schools must provide a safe and supportive learning environment. Governments can regulate, accredit, inspect, and monitor them. Parents can exercise control by taking part in school management or by choosing where to educate their child. Teachers teach, but they also do much more. They are guided by ethical codes. Evaluators observe them. Inspectors scrutinize them. Other teachers and the community also sometimes monitor their work. Parents must ensure students go to school well prepared. In some countries, they can be punished if they do not. Students must not disrupt other students' ability to learn and teachers' ability to teach. International organizations help determine our global goals, and member states can question their actions. Donors promise aid. Reporting and scrutiny can expose those falling short of their commitments. The private sector is increasingly influential. Regulations, codes of conduct, transparent contracts, and media scrutiny ensure private actors work for the greater good. Accountability matters. It really matters. But accountability systems don't always work. They can be unaffordable for poorer countries. If badly designed, they penalize the poorest, erode teacher motivation, and narrow the curriculum. The GEM report shows what is needed. Reporting to international bodies, auditing the budget, monitoring, and regulating. Transparency is crucial. Clear and accessible information shows who's responsible for what is being achieved, and when systems break down. Trust is more effective than penalty. Punishing those who don't achieve strong education results is counterproductive. What we need is to build capacity and to provide resources. We need adequate information about the way education systems are working, and for there to be genuine commitment. Let's get accountability right.
So, accountability is really an important process, and it really shows who is responsible for what, or should show who is responsible for what, and how problems can be fixed. However, what is important to say from the onset of this presentation is that if the SDG 4 agenda has to progress, everyone has a responsibility, has a shared responsibility on the education. And while responsibility are shared, accountability is not. This means that accountability also cannot be held, people cannot be held accountable for outcomes beyond their controls. For example, teachers cannot be blamed solely if the learning outcomes of students are poor. And accountability mechanisms can be effective in some contexts and not effective in others. But we know, and this is very important for the topic we are dealing with here, is that governments, as a primary duty, as really the bearers of the right of education. So we know that the right to education, every country in the world has ratified the commitment to the right of education. However, only 55% of the country, this right is justiciable, meaning that people, citizens, cannot bring violation of governments before courts. And this is very important. So in terms of responsibility and accountability, governments, and to create accountability mechanisms right, should create space for meaningful engagement to build trust, develop credible education plans and transparent budgets, build a culture of build and not blaming, and establish, monitor, enforce regulation and standards. And to do this, an enabling environments with resources, capacity, information is needed. Government should be supportive and build capacity, but they should also be committed and fund education. And we know very well that is not always happening, and the aid to the finance to education has been falling for 6 years in a row to less than 6% now. So after having presented very shortly some of the main messages of the new Global Education Report, I move to the topic that is really on the agenda of this conference, because the next Global Education Monitoring Report, which I'm leading, will be about migration, forced displacement, and education. So it has been said here, and we understood from the different intervention yesterday, today, that this is a very complex phenomena, because there is a complexity of terminology, a complexity of actors, different two-way, third-way relationship. And even if we think about the term migration, is not I mean, there are differences among the actors talking about migration. Are we talking about migration, voluntary migration? Are we talking about forced migration, involuntary migration? Are we talking about refugees? And all these, or internally displaced people. And all these different terminologies and terms have a bear in terms of education. Because the right to education should imply that everyone is included in education. However, this does not happen. So the report will look at the different form of migration and displacement, and the links, influence, and different aspects in relation to education. Education in global terms, formal education, non-formal education, and informal education. And we'll consider a larger range of topics. So it will look at origin countries, it will look at destination countries, but also at transit countries. We can see that there is not a linear relation between migration, displacement, and education. The relations are multiple, the actors are multiple. Who are the migrants? Who are the refugees? We are not talking about a population or group of people which have the same need or the same characteristics. These people are very heterogeneous. So they can have different needs, and also in terms of education. When do they move? At what age they move? At what age they interrupt schooling? Which is the level of education we are considering? What are the policies that are implemented in origin countries and also in destination countries? Are we talking about brain drain? Are we talking about brain waste, brain circulation? Are we talking about a world where the discussion of education rights is different from migrants, different from refugees? Why are we going to build a world where there is the right of education to everyone, for everyone, without distinction? How to make this world exist? So this is the question that the report will address in a nutshell, and we know that it's a huge undertaking. The volume of migration flows are huge, but what is interesting is that in general we hear about international migrants in terms of migration, and rarely about internal migrants. However, in terms of flows, the flows of internal migrants or domestic migrants is huge, is much bigger. So we are talking about 865 domestic internal migrants, 244 million of international migrants, and 60 million of people that are displaced. And as I was saying, there is a variety of definition with different implications for education. We hear in the debate every day talking about migrants, talking about refugees, talking about asylum seekers, internally displaced people. Their rights and their access and learning outcomes in education terms are very different. And these people move for very different motives, and different forces are driving their migration. So what is interesting, I think, also for the kind of the conference here, is that what is new is not migration, is not the refugees, is the fact that the size of the people moving is much larger than it was in the past. And this, a sense of emergence arises in many countries. But the point is that these flows of migration or mobility does not happen only in the north, they happen in the south, where very often the resources are even more constrained to compare to in richer countries. And we know that why I was talking about accountability. Accountability is also about the fact that there are still 264 million of youth, children, adolescents that are out of education. And 1/3 of out-of-school children live in conflict-affected areas. So one may wonder, who is accountable for all this? So I think what's important is also to think about this topic about university, refugees, migrants in a globalized world in terms of the SDG 4 agenda, leave no one behind. How? Probably the easiest way to do it is to think about a right-based approach to education. The key question the Global Education Monitoring Report will then try to address. The Global Education Monitoring Report on this topic is scheduled to be published at the end of 2018 and is feeding also the Global Compacts processes. We have decided to look at particular issues concerning education, about do migration and displacement affect access to education? If so, how? Do migration and displacement affect quality of education? And if so, how? How do education, inclusion, and equity help to improve educational outcomes of migrants and refugees? Why do migration and displacement matter for education? And why and how does education matter for migration and displacement? So, as I was saying at the beginning, it's a huge undertaking, but it's very relevant for the conference here. And there are a number of challenges. First of all, because this is not a simple one-way relation. It involves multiple actors, multiple countries, multiple policy makers. And there are huge data challenges. We don't know much about these people. We don't know much about what are the educational needs, both of migrants, be the vulnerable migrants or economic migrants, we know very little, or be they refugees or internally displaced, where the situation for education and data is really even worse. And in starting doing this report, I came into a number of already of challenges that I would like to, we heard about them, but there are a number. If we think about system, if we think about teachers and school, if you think about parents and students, all of these actors face a number of challenges. The systems, the quality of education at all levels, but at all levels, starting from early childhood education, the age of participation and selection. What happens if someone is too old to enter an education cycle when he flees his country or her countries? The duration of schooling per day, that means also the capacity of being enrolled in school in countries especially where there is a huge amount of child labor. How grade repetition are structured, the lack of bridging programs between formal and non-formal education, resources, capacity constraint, and political will. and the lack of coordination between different actors. The fact that there are parallel systems that imply a huge risk of segregation, or systems that are used in order to allow people to be in the formal system but not really in the system, like the double shift educational systems. Lack of flexibility, lack of vocational training. Then we have important challenges for parents and the students, especially related to the discontinuation of education, the little information and awareness, the fact that there are other areas that are connected to education that matters to get an education. And then there are also important issues concerning the preparedness of teachers and educators, accreditation and certification mechanism, security issues facing schools and teachers in school. So to conclude, it has been, the word integration has been mentioned many times today. It is believed by many UN agencies working in the topic that mainstreaming is the most sustainable option. So this means full inclusion. We are not talking about integration. We are not talking about assimilation. We are talking about full inclusion. Inclusion in the classroom, inclusion in the system, inclusion in the society, in the ideas. And it is not easy. There are many barriers to this. We need better data on refugees and IDPs' education. Education data should be disaggregated to account also for displaced children and youth so that they are visible. We need data to make them visible, to make their educational needs visible. Refugees have different educational needs. This means that we need flexibility. We need flexibility to address the educational needs. We need distinct educational pathways. There are surveys that are run in some countries that show, in many cases, that the educational outcomes and learning outcomes of refugees are much better compared to those of natives. So it's not only talking about the most vulnerable, it's talking about a waste of resources. And this is very important. And then there is also the need that go beyond the cognitive needs, the cognitive needs. We are talking about people that have faced psychological issues and trauma, and we need people to be trained and prepared. Teachers need to be qualified and need motivation also to be better prepared to address their different needs. And we need also to address the issue in another way. There are many teachers that are refugees. Why can we use these resources better? What do we need to get these resources to be used and not to be wasted? And finally, I would say that the right of education is vital, and they need their education rights to be enshrined in national laws and policies. And who is accountable for not doing so? So, we heard that, but I would like to highlight, to conclude this talk, improving access is fundamental at all levels of education, but is not enough. Quality and inclusive education are key. And we need people coordinating measure between host and destination, but also transition countries. And to ask questions that people do not often ask, like how education and life cycle overlap. How are the services, health, for example, food, to make education to reach children? And then it's important to distinguish between the short-term needs and the long-term needs. And it was said, but it's very important, we need to take the voice of people on the move into account. Thanks a lot.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Dadio. Merci pour l'ensemble de ces éclairages. Nous n'avons pas de temps pour les questions. Je voudrais néanmoins souligner quelques aspects qui me semblent particulièrement importants dans ce que vous nous avez dit, avant que nous puissions nous répartir dans les différents groupes de travail. Tout d'abord, vous nous avez rappelé qu'il y a une pluralité d'acteurs qui travaillent sur ces questions. Autrement dit, une sorte de communauté éducative qui va des institutions internationales aux ONG, aux institutions universitaires, bien entendu, et également les États. Et j'aimerais m'attarder un instant sur ce type d'acteurs, parce que je crois que là, vous avez soulevé un point aveugle de nos journées d'études, qu'on avait du reste évoqué lorsqu'on a préparé ces journées au mois de mars dernier, ici même à la Grégorienne. Quand on fait une comparaison dans le temps entre la mobilisation pour les migrants et les réfugiés, dans les années 70 par exemple, et ce qui se fait actuellement, et dont nous sommes en quelque sorte les témoins, il y a une grande différence. La grande différence, c'est que dans les années 70, on interrogeait les causes des migrations et des réfugiés. Et vous nous avez rappelé à l'instant que ne serait-ce que pour les enfants, qui n'ont pas accès à l'éducation, un tiers d'entre eux sont dans des situations de conflit. Il y a là, en termes de recherche, mais également dans la compréhension des processus qui nous intéressent, et d'une certaine manière, ça renvoie également à ce que vous nous demandiez tout à l'heure, si on ne veut pas être simplement dans l'empathie et l'injonction morale, une réflexion à avoir sur les causes de ces migrations, dont vous nous avez dit qu'en termes de volume, elles n'ont jamais été aussi importantes. Et effectivement, il y a un certain nombre d'États dans le monde. Alors, comme politologue, j'ai mes catégories partagées avec mes collègues sur ce qu'on appelle les États faibles, ou les ravages éventuellement de certaines politiques, les États-providence. La typologie des États-providence est riche et nous montre bien que le rôle des États à l'égard des politiques éducatives peut être extrêmement différent d'une culture à une autre, ou suivant les modèles économiques, les hégémonies économico-culturelles qui prévalent. Mais lorsqu'on parle de migration et de réfugiés, il faudrait également soulever le rôle d'un certain nombre de gouvernements, de pays qui sont riches mais où la corruption l'emporte, avec le soutien plus ou moins conscient, plus ou moins consentant de ce qu'il est convenu d'appeler la communauté internationale. Voilà. Donc je pense que lorsque vous évoquez le rôle des États, il nous faut aller jusque-là et nous dire effectivement si ces flux n'ont jamais été aussi importants, c'est également parce qu'au regard d'un certain nombre de critères, certains États ne jouent pas leur rôle, certains États ou certains gouvernements plus exactement n'ont pas la légitimité qu'ils prétendent avoir, et donc il y a des causes bien précises à ces phénomènes que nous étudions. Vous êtes revenu également sur ce que Ioannis Panoussi avait pu nous dire d'une autre manière, en nous disant, moi comme juriste, quand j'enseigne, eh bien, je suis obligé d'avoir un vocabulaire extrêmement précis parce que toutes les personnes qu'un politologue, je prends mon cas, peut embrasser d'une certaine manière sous des notions assez proches, moi comme juriste, je suis obligé de les préciser. Et finalement, vous nous avez dit la même chose, mais sur un autre terrain, mais qui est tout aussi intéressant, qui consiste à dire à chaque dénomination renvoie en fait des besoins éducatifs qui sont différents. Et donc, soyons le plus précis possible et au plus près des réalités pour que les politiques éducatives et les actions éducatives que nous souhaitons mettre en œuvre soient véritablement pertinentes, évaluables, et il en est de notre responsabilité. Et puis le dernier point porte sur la recherche. Alors comme chercheur, bien évidemment, j'ai été heureux de vous entendre interpeller les chercheurs, mais sous deux angles. Vous nous avez dit que ce que vous souhaitiez, c'était qu'il y ait une sorte d'agenda de la recherche qui soit mise en place, parce qu'effectivement, nous manquons encore de beaucoup de données, d'informations sur les réalités dont nous parlons et sur lesquels nous souhaitons intervenir. Et puis vous nous avez interpellé également sur les usages sociaux de la recherche, ce lien entre le milieu des chercheurs et puis celui des décideurs au sens large. Donc je crois que ce sont autant de demandes que vous avez formulées qui méritent d'être reprises, travaillées dans le futur réseau que nous souhaitons lancer, et puis bien évidemment dès maintenant au sein des différents ateliers de travail auxquels nous allons maintenant nous abandonner. Voilà, merci beaucoup. Merci Madame pour votre intervention, pour tous vos apports. Merci à vous également. Tout à l'heure, Paulina nous a rappelé qu'il y avait quelques modifications. Il y en aura sans doute d'autres puisque nous ne sommes plus tout à fait dans les temps, mais je vous fais confiance pour que vers 3h20, on va dire 25 au plus tard, vous puissiez être de retour. Et pour l'instant, nous allons nous séparer en différents groupes dans les ateliers de travail qui sont proposés. Donc, je vous donne rendez-vous.
Est-ce que je peux dire...
Oui, bien sûr, je vous en prie.
Juste une chose, j'ai amené des copies des résumés en anglais et en français du nouveau rapport qui sont dehors. Ceux qui sont intéressés, servez-vous. Et d'autre part, ce serait vraiment important pour nous, si vous avez des expériences, des cas que vous voulez nous envoyer parce qu'ils figurent dans les rapports, que ce soit des best practices ou des worst practices, nous serons vraiment heureux de les recevoir. Voilà. Merci beaucoup.